Hey guys, so here we go with the first of the question and answer periods. How it's going to work, it hasn't been a full week because I just put this up the other day, but when I do one of these question and answer periods, then underneath it for the next week you can ask questions, and on Tuesday nights I will try to get to it every Tuesday, but on Tuesday nights I'll do the answers, and on Wednesday I'll upload it. Alrighty, so we do have a few questions from this week, and so let's go. I'm on the computer from the when I announced it, and I'm going to read the all the questions. And let's see, so the first one was Jason had asked what the size of the cable was on those wolf snares that I had made, and all those wolf snares were all done in with the 1/8 wire. Half of them were in the steel wire and half were in airplane cable. These are just 4 rolls of wire that I had laying around. I've been using the 7/64 lately. I like it better, but I figured might as well use up these 4 rolls of wire that have just been sitting there. So anyways, and then the wolf snares, if you get the ones for the rams, they go down to I don't even think they're as big as 3/32, but you can use that on the rams too. So alrighty, so then next question was Abe had asked where to get my book, copy of my book, and you can get them on Amazon, and Amazon is the cheapest place because they've got pretty good shipping rates. But you can also order one from me, but like I said, it costs a little bit more money because the shipping in Canada is ridiculous, of course. Especially if it's going to go to the States, then it's really bad. Okay, and then Jen had asked, Jen from the Wild Yam, had asked what is the most challenging animal to trap and why. I think everyone, anyway, at least everyone who is actually trapped for timber wolves would agree that they are the most difficult animal to catch continuously. You know, you can put enough stuff out there and go out and get 1 or 2 by accident, but you know, to consistently catch wolves, it's a pretty difficult thing to do. They learn very quickly when they see their buddies caught in a pack. The pack will, that's why most guys will put out a bunch of snares, because you try and take the whole pack out as fast as you can, because they will learn. Like last winter, after I got those 3, I never saw a wolf track on my trap line for a month. They just vacated my trap line and moved on to other trap lines around me where the guys weren't really trapping for them, and they came through. They started coming back through later on in the year, but twice, in that 2-month period where I saw very few wolf tracks, I had wolves come through, and they would hit my skidoo trail, and they would literally jump over the skidoo trail and then keep going and through the deep snow, and just instead of utilizing the hard pack trail, because they'd probably watched their buddies get caught in the sets that were on the skidoo trails. So yeah, and they are just so intelligent. They've got a huge keen sense of smell. Most wolves are taken in blind sets or they're scent post sets, because as soon as you put any bait out or like scent that they haven't put there themselves, then it instantly piques their interest and just makes them stop and start to you know, check around. And once they get on caution mode, they are gonna smell, you know, whatever's around. If it's a steel trap or a snare. Like I've had wolves even last year. I think I videotaped, you know, and showed the tracks where a wolf walked down the trail, walked right in. His tracks were actually past the snare, and so his head had to be right in that snare, and it just backed right out and took off. You know, there might be guys that disagree with the fact that wolves aren't. They might say they aren't, but that's probably guys, you know, because coyotes can be very smart too. But generally, anybody who's trapped a lot of wolves or tried to will agree that they're the most, you know, the brightest things out there. Okay, and one guy wanted to know, this was a hunt for fish, hey Dave, what do you do in your spare time? No, just being sarcastic. What spare time I do have, I spend it all trying to figure out something I can do about trapping. So, like making coyote snares like I did 2 nights ago. I made, you know, 50 some wolf snares, a bunch of coyote ram snares, and such. Luke wants to know what's my preferred trap die, and do I wax traps, snare, lengths, size, species. I dye my traps with a combination. You can use the trap dye that you buy at stores. That works great. You can use the ones that mix with water. I don't like those ones myself. You get the ones that mix with gas. The gas evaporates, you know, really well. You know, the more super unleaded gas that you buy, or even probably the best one is Coleman fuel. Because it evaporates perfectly clean. There's nothing left but the trap dye. Or what I use 1 part Tremclad rust paint, black, of course, flat black, and 5 parts gas. So if it's a gallon Tremclad, it's 5 gallons of gas. But like I said, you can use the naphtha, but you know, a gallon of naphtha fuel, it's Coleman fuel by the way, is you know, $15, where a gallon of super unleaded gas is maybe $6 or whatever, something so considerably cheaper. And I've got all my traps dyed like that, and I haven't had. You got to do it obviously way in advance. Like I did mine at home about a month ago, and you know, because then that gives all the smell of the gas to you know, plenty of time to leave, and then I have the traps outside, so they you know, that helps them too. And I do not wax my traps. I dye them, but I'm not a mink trapper. You know, in mink are a light-footed animal. The guys that do a lot of mink trapping like to have those traps waxed, so they're a lot faster. And for fox too, I think it helps them with freezing up. I don't do it. That paint that I use is almost like a, you know, it's got a really nice, good hard coating on it, and it makes them react very fast too. So I don't wax my traps. I tried it once, and never wax coney bears, by the way. That just is ultra dangerous. But snare lengths, sizes, species, boy, that's a multi-parted question there. You know, you can find that all out on from the trap supply places, but wolves, I would never go below 3/30 seconds for wolves, and I'd have a hard time using 3/30 seconds, I guess, on a free hanging snare. 7/64 works very well. 3/30 seconds I would use. I wouldn't go below that. You know, the thought process before was always 1/8 cable for wolves. Had to be that, because so they wouldn't chew out. But there's been a lot of thought going out lately that the smaller diameter cable will actually dispatch the animal faster than the 1/8. And you know, I've tried the smaller stuff, and hey, I mean, I get some live, some, you know, dispatched with both sizes, but I think it has more to do with the locks and stuff than the actual cable and your loop size. You know, you want to get a wolf caught right here and behind the ears, very close. You get them way down in the neck, close to the chest, and there's a lot of fur, a lot of body mass there to try and choke an animal out. A lot of muscle around the neck, and to cut off the windpipe, you got to get all the way through there. That's so, you know, you always want to try, well, every animal is get them as far up on the neck as possible, so they'll dispatch a lot faster. Snare lengths. I cut my wolf snares, the wire I cut off about 7 feet long, and then I do make some smaller too, but for those ones I always have an extension cable, and it's a cable that you can you attach it to the snare, and you can put it around a tree, whichever, and then when an animal's caught, you don't throw away that extension, you just disconnect it from the snare, and you can use that extension again, which is you know, to save some money. And I can show that on a video of this when I start setting snares there. But the other thing too, when I catch a wolf in a snare, usually, you know, from here to about here it'll be chewed on or twisted up and stuff. And if you've got another 5 feet of cable that's not bothered, I just snip it off and I make an extension out of the leftover snare, as long as it's not too bunged up. So, you know, wolf loop length or size 12-14 inches. 14 inches is just generally the accepted. I guess it'd be 14 to 16, or 12 is a little small for the big timber wolf, but the 14 inches is a good loop size. You know, you go down to, you know, 8 to 10 for lynx, coyotes, you know, 6 to 7 inch for fox, such stuff like that. So, anyways, okay, let's see. Okay, and Robbie just mentioned that it's nice that I try to answer people's questions, and I explained, you know, to Rob that I'm, you know, my channel is still reasonably small compared to some of the big guys, and you know, not to be discouraged or you know, pissed at the guys. If you like guys like you know, the really big channels, you got to remember, if they don't answer your message, you got to remember they're probably, you know, getting 1,000 messages a day or 500 messages a day. If they took the time to answer every one, gosh, they'd never be able to go out trapping and make any more videos. They'd be sitting on the computer for 24 hours a day. Oh, and that brings up another point. You know, the guys, you know, that are doing the videos, well, like I'm one of them too, but everybody that's doing the videos, you know, nobody's making a ton of money off this stuff, but, you know, to help them out, you know, don't just, you know, delete the ads right away, you know, because that's how the guys make their money, and you know, and it's, like I said, it's not a lot of money, but it helps with, you know, buying new cameras, doing whatever, the you know, the cost of you know, stuff to do this. And you know, so, you know, take the time to, you know, to check out the ads once in a while. It's, you know, you make like a few cents an ad, and every time the ad is watched. So, you know, just for those guys that are out there that are doing that, just you know, help them out. Watch an ad every once in a while. You know, don't go crazy with them, because YouTube watches. If you just click on them and, you know, just click them off right away after a few seconds, they'll. But there's some pretty good ads out there, stuff that's pretty interesting. So, anyways, we'll get back to this. Josh wants to know what my thoughts are on drumming your fur. When to do it and what animals do you drum? And what to use for drumming material. Well, for drumming material, I'd say if you can get a fine sawdust, that's about the only thing. But here's the question. Where are you selling your fur? If you're selling your fur to a private buyer, then yes, by all means, you know, you can do some drumming. Because what you're doing is you're cleaning out the grease and some of the dirt out of your fur. But this is only long-haired fur that's fur out. Okay, anything with fur out gets drummed. Coyotes, fox, fisher, marten, lynx, bobcats, such as that. You know, coons, muskrats, mink, otter, they don't get drummed anyway, so you don't even need to worry about that. But if you are sending to the auction houses, they do the drumming. It's a total waste of time for you to do it at home. They don't grade your fur until after it's drummed. So, I mean, if you want to spend some time, you know, fixing up your fur to look nicer before you send it to the auction houses, then go through it very carefully with something and remove stuff that you don't think the drumming might take out. Burrs, you know, pine sap, something like that. But be very careful with it, because if you take it off and pull out some guard hairs, it's going to be a little splotch, and if there's enough of it gone, you know, as soon as they drum it and fluff it up, that place where there's some guard hairs gone will be instantly noticeable. So if you're pulling out you know, pine gum or something, you can use, there's a lot of things that people, you know, that Johnson's No More Tangles product, stuff like that they all work good for taking stuff like that out. And if you don't want to try it, it's better to leave it in than to take it out and pull guard hairs. Okay, so just because it will all come out in the tanning process, it'll be cleaned right up even if it doesn't come out in the drumming. So rather than damage your fur by pulling out some guard hairs on stuff like pine sap or whatever, just leave it there if you can't get it out easily. Don't go overboard. Okay, Brady wants to know, what are some of the tools for fur handling and or trapping that you couldn't live without? Well, fur handling right now, I think the thing that I've, over the last 4 or 5 years, that I've got that I never used to use when I was younger for a fleshing beam is those ABS pipes that I use for fleshing otters, fisher, coon, all the, you know, the bigger animals that have to be, that are skin cased. Those things are just like a godsend compared to the stuff like trying to flesh them on a flat board. Like I used to flesh them all on the stretcher. I just put them on the stretcher, fleshed them, turned them over a little bit, fleshed them, and you know, it just keeps all that grease off the stretcher and then into the fur. You know, and the other thing is a belly knife for beavers. It's you know, that it takes, I used to do it with just a straight knife and, you know, go from the top lip and down, and, you know, you cut a couple inches at a time and get it all the way down there. Those you know, belly, you make that first cut through the lip, stick that belly hook in. Same as for, you know, when you're gutting deer, it's a belly hook like that. But in most of the a lot of the beaver skinning knives have them already made into the back of the blade. But then you just, you know, pull down all the way down to the vent. Only thing about it is you got to make sure the skin is pulled tight, and what you might have to stop halfway through to take, if any fur gets caught up into the actual cutting edge, it'll stop it from cutting. So you just keep the fur tight like that, or the skin tight, and just pull down. So those two things for the fur handling, and those little the guys from FHA from Trans-Canada Trapline, I did a couple product demos on some of the stuff I got from them, and you know, it was awesome products. But in appreciation, they sent me a couple little things. One was an FHA, what do you call them things? You know what I mean? Guard for skinning so you don't get it all over your clothes. I never used to use one of them when I was in the bush. I just let all the crap get all over my clothes. I didn't care. Probably the same way reason wolves roll in all the smelly stuff, so animals can't smell what you are. But you know, so they sent me one of them. That thing is awesome too. But they sent me one of those, I think it's a Howl little razor knife. And that is the best thing I've ever used for cleaning out around you know, wolves' heads, splitting lips, you know, cleaning out around the ears, you know, splitting the ears all the way out like you have to for taxidermy, and doing the feet. That thing is an absolute gem of a knife, boy. And it's got the replaceable blades. I don't replace them right away. I mean, you just a couple shots down a steel and it's as good as new again. And then when it gets really bad, you just, you know, change the blade. But I haven't had to change it yet, and I used it all last year. So that, and then as far as trapping, one thing that I just wouldn't want to live out without right now, because that I didn't have when I was younger, is Connie Bear trap setters. You know, I mean, I can still take a 330 and set it like nothing. It's not that difficult to do. But where it gets really, really handy is when you've got a 50-pound beaver jacked into one of those 330 Connie Bears, the Savageos, the Belials, whatever, and you try fighting with that with your hands, trying to hold that beaver upright while you get the tension down on that spring. Man, those trap setters, you lay them on the ground, it's done. And for marten trapping too, for the 120s, you know, those are easy to set. But I'm telling you, when you're out on your trap line and it's 35 below, and you've been out all day, and your hands are cold, you're heading home, it's almost dark and your hands are getting cold, and you got a couple marten there and your fingertips are numb, trust me, it is really nice to just be able to shoot like this and have those traps set. You know, not that at 40 below you're going to be taking the marten out of the trap generally, you know, just because they'll normally be frozen in. But every once in a while you can, you know, you can tell after a while whether you're going to be able to get out or not without fighting with it. But even to set the replacement traps, if you just take the whole trap and pelt out at the same time. So that, and of course, you know, an axe. Chainsaw now, I don't ever have time to, you know, I carry a chainsaw with me everywhere I go because I just don't have time to be chopping trees out of the way of, you know, because you get a storm, I'll sometimes have half a dozen trees I got to cut across that are across the trails when I go out, and you know, and with an axe it takes time, and time is just something I just never seem to have enough of anymore. So anyways, okay, and Andreas wants to know how many Marten sets did I have out last season and how many do I think I'll set out this season. Well, this season I will set out almost exactly the same amount as last year, except that I am going to put in a trail. I've got about a 6, maybe 7 square mile little area on the other side of the main river that goes through my trap line, and I can't get across there in the winter because with the skidoo it's just too, well, by the time I can get across it's too late to even bother trying. But there's wolves running back there too, so I'm going in, as soon as I'm done up here at the lodge, I'm going in there and building a bridge to get into that area. So I may have a few more marten traps, but let me see real quick. I'm going to go I've probably got 45 marten traps, 45 to 50 marten traps out during the winter. And then there will be some, you know, some of them are marten and fisher traps, and some are just fisher traps. And then there will be some mink traps too, but they're usually, I've got them usually pulled by December anyways. After December, once the ice gets pretty thick, mink, you know, they're pretty hard to bait. They're running under the ice most of the time, and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so you probably, like I said, close to 50 sets, marten sets all the time. And like I said, I'll be right on that same amount every year, because I've got the entire trap line basically cordoned off, and that's the sets that I'll have. And so you know, you're going to end up generally with about, at the end of the season, what I've been getting is about 1 marten per set. Now some of them don't come out of this, like I'll have some sets that I don't get a marten out of all year, and then I'll have others that I'll get 4 or 5 out of. So you know, probably I've only been on that line now, this will be my 3rd year that I have the license, the 01 license on it, and I will probably be able to start figuring, okay, that there set I haven't caught a marten in it in 3 years, so it's probably a waste of time even having it there and checking it. And so then I can pull it out and utilize the trap in the box somewhere else, and maybe throw in that spot, you know, a bait station for some wolf sets, or put a marten nesting box there. I keep generally half a mile between my trap sets at least. So if I've got, you know, a trap every half a mile, and I pull one, now I've got a mile in between there. Now that's a perfect distance to have a marten nesting box, because your female marten are going to run about a, you know, 3/8 of a mile or 1/4 mile circle all the way around. So you're talking from their nesting spot, so there'll be always a 1/4 mile or so within that area, or a little more. So you put a box there, and then you've got a safe zone for that female marten to, hopefully she doesn't wander off and get caught in one of your sets, because you know, you always want to keep them around, and you can even, you know, back it off a little bit more. I have you know, quite a few marten nesting boxes out there already, and stuff, so it's that's always is helpful. Okay, let's see. Oh boy. Oh, here, Jacob wants to know, have you ever used or known anyone that has luck with Hob Barker's Wildcat #1 lure? Now, I don't use any commercial lures. I never have in my entire life. I've always made my own, and so I can't really comment on that. But hey, if anybody else, you know, wants to give Jacob Barlow a hand with that, that'd be great. It's Hob Barker's Wildcat #1 lure he's asking about. If anybody knows anything about it, let me know and I'll pass it on to him. Okay, and Adam wants to say, boy, we'll have to keep this question pretty simple if we expect you to answer them, eh? Yeah, Adam, that's and he wants to know, do I still enjoy pancakes with mouse shit in it? Well, number one, I picked the mouse shit out before I ate it, okay? So, like I told you, I haven't been hungry enough to try it for a long time, so I'll have to say no on that one. Okay, and Daniel says he's got large, okay, you're going to have to give me a little more information on this, Daniel. He says, I've got large pests running wild up here, and I'm wondering how to strike down on these beasts. And not quite sure. He says he's finding all sorts of carcasses and giblets. Just give me some more information on what kind of carcasses you're finding that are being killed. Unless this is a joke. But if you are, Daniel, just you know, give me some more information, because you know, we've had, my wife used to have rabbits and chicken and pheasants and everything, so we've had a lot of critters that come in and try and kill them and stuff. So anyways, and Fred wants me to give us some moose calling lessons. Okay, because moose hunting's coming up. Okay, now I'm not the best moose caller in the world, and I don't have my moose call with me. But I will do a call here on, so I'll do a cow call, and like I said, I've listened to a lot of moose talking when I used to be in the bush all the time. I used to do a lot of calling and moose and wolves, and have them, you know, answering back. You know, you hear a lot of, you know, people will do a cow call, and they'll do a Now, I have never heard a female moose call when she's calling for a mate that did a second and third call. It's always been just a and nothing else, and about one, you know, every 10, you know, I've heard them a little bit more often, but usually 10 minutes anyways in between the calls. And then you've got, you know, well, bulls can be very vocal, you know, when they're in mating season. You've got you know, a bull grunt as he's coming into a cow call, and it's a very, you know, kind of an odd sound. It almost like sounds like, you know, pulling their foot out of the mud. It's kind of like a like that, and they will walk along and make that with almost every step as they're coming in there. It'll be and 90%, I say higher than that, 95% of the time, if they're making that sound, they are moving. When they stop making that call. When they stop to look around and judge things out, then they stop making that call almost all the time. Now, you'll get bulls when they get close to a cow, and they will soften that up really, really down low when they're like following and it's a very like a white-tailed deer with their tending grunt. Same sort of deal. And like I said, with a moose call, a birch bark moose call, or, you know, what I used to use is, you remember those thermoses? They were about yay long, about that big around, blue, plastic, green, red, whatever, but the bottom screwed off, and that glass inner part would come out. That was what I used to use for my moose call, not the glass part, but that plastic tube had a perfect handle on it, and it fit on your mouth just perfectly for calling, and it echoed really nice. I liked it better than birch bark, but a lot of guys like to be more natural and stuff. But I also want to show you what a lot of people use that can't or don't know how to call moose. Okay, you've got tin cans were the common thing. Now this is, I put this together real fast. I got 3 of them here just to show you the difference. But this string here is a little too small. It needs to be a little bit bigger, but it's any cotton rope, and you pull it firmly between your fingers. And like I said, this needs to be a little thicker because this is small enough to actually almost cut into your hand when you're doing it. But you pull it and you're squeezing tight. Okay? And you got to remember, you can really screw up a moose call, because from a distance that sounds like, from right close to me, that sounds so stupid, but from a distance it actually sounds pretty good. And here's one that's with a tin can, and the string has to be wet, by the way. I've got water here. A dry one ain't gonna do nothing. And if you're moose hunting, you've always got water around anyways, because you're generally standing right at the water. But so now here's a metal bottom can. Okay. So metal sounds way better than plastic. And so now here you've got one that's in a really tiny can. And the smaller the can, the higher pitched you're going to have your call. And this is too small. I just made it just to show you the difference. The bigger the can, the deeper, and it'll sound more like a mature animal. You see the difference? But and those things, all you got here is a hole punched in the back of the can with a knife or with a nail. See, the rope forced through, and then knots tied in here so it can't come back out. Okay, so that's one way you can make a moose call. And that doesn't sound too bad for calling moose. Now, like I said, you can make a lot of mistakes with a moose call when it's from a distance, and just about anybody making any kind of noise, you know, when a moose is rutting, you can get them up to within 100 yards, 150 yards pretty easy. You know, and that was never a problem back before people got popular with archery hunting for moose, because to get a mature bull moose in that last 50 yards close enough to shoot with a bow can be a real tricky thing. They, you know, you'll get the odd one that'll just come charging in, you know, without a care in the world, but just on a string running. But those are generally the younger animals. But with big guys, they don't often do that. So you gotta really, you know, fine tune that calling once to get them into that last. But you know, if you're rifle hunting, you know, and you've got a big enough area, you know, where you can see 100, 150 yards, which a lot of moose hunting is done on water, so that's usually not a problem. It's pretty easy to get them, if they're in the full rut, to get them out to the call. However, if they've got a cow with them, then, you know, and she's ready to breed, you're not going to draw him away from that by calling with a cow. Then your best bet is to start, you know, throwing out challenge grunts to the moose and stuff like that, and just acting like a bull so that he'll come in and, you know, want to protect his girlfriend. But anyway, so like I said, that's just you know, a couple ways you can make moose calls, but you know, using the voice is much better, and you're closing your nose, and you would normally have that moose call, your birch bark or whatever you're using. You can buy plastic ones in the stores, and you know, and so you're closing your nose, cupping your hands, holding your call right there, and it's a and they do waver. And cow moose, by the way, too, this is not during the mating, but they make a noise that I've never been able to imitate, and it's just one of the craziest noises I've ever heard in the bush. It's a noise that they make when they're startled, and it's a warning noise, I think, to their calf, because I've done it several times where I jumped them, and it's almost like a barking, rattling, coughing sound. It's even hard to explain what it really sounds like, but it's a freaky noise. But anyways, and the other thing, somebody asked me a while back about howling up wolves. So Wolves aren't like coyotes. They a very deep voice. Coyotes are yippy high right off the start there. Wolves start low, go up, and they really waver their voice, and then it comes back down, and it's like a and you know, I can't even explain. I couldn't even count the number of times, like even with my deer hunters, how I'll get wolves off in the distance answering back, and I'll howl, they'll howl back. The hunters love that. And I used to do it like from the porch of my cabin and stuff too, and it's just probably the most, next to loons, probably the most welcome sound, I guess, that most people would like to hear in the bush. And to me, it's just always been the true sign of a wilderness, is this, listening to wolves howling. Like I said, 2 years ago, I've called wolves. I've twice had wolves within a dozen feet of me. Called them up and had packs circling up to within 30 feet of me. I was hiding behind a fallen down stump, calling, and they, they got up to within 30 feet before, well, the closest ones were 30 feet, and they come around the stump and they saw me, and it was like, phew, they were gone, and they, a little bark and warning bark to all the rest of them, and they were just, man, scattered like the wind. But that, just getting that howl out there and having them come to investigate is a pretty awesome feeling. So, but anywho, I think that was the last question. Yeah. So anyhow, this is the end of the first question and answer period. If anybody has any other questions, put them on the downside of this here video, and I will collect them, and for next week we'll answer all those ones. So alrighty, have a good night, guys, and well, I guess good night is just a little bit after midnight here right now, so, but you won't get this till tomorrow. So anyways, have a good week. Talk to you later.